Welcome to the Diary of a Former Fat Kid. I'm your host and former fat kid, Brian Chris Butler. Today I have the privilege of hanging out with Carl KJ Johnson. We'll be calling him KJ from here on out. He is retired Lieutenant Colonel of the U.S. Marine Corps and Chicago director of the C.S.Lewis Institute. Welcome, KJ. How you doing today?
Good to be here. And I was a pretty fat kid myself, and I think I'm returning in that direction right now.
Oh, the journeys. So, yeah, man, thank you for joining me today. And look forward to digging into your story some more.
Yeah, it's good to catch up.
Yeah, for sure. So you are a retired lieutenant colonel with the U.S. Marines and the city director of an organization named after a dead British guy.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. How did that come about? Let's dig into that a little bit.
Oh, yeah, there's parallels. It's a long story, but to give you the Reader's Digest version, I grew up a good Christian kid until I wasn't. And then I got married, had kids while I was in the Marine Corps, and decided to try to figure out where I went off the rails, and realized that I had never been discipled, and went on a journey trying to find someone to disciple me. I felt like I had all the pieces because I had lots of great teaching as a kid, but I just needed to know if I was putting the pieces together. And God had led me to an organization that was named after a dead British guy, the C.S. Lewis Institute. And I did their one-year discipleship program, and it changed my life. So I knew then that I needed to make a shift in my career trajectory. So when I hit my 20 years in the Marine Corps, I retired, and I knew I was going into ministry. I didn't know I was going to work for the Institute because I didn't think they needed my help. But when I moved back to Chicago, they're the ones who said, "Hey, why don't you start up and open up the Chicago office?" So that's that trajectory. But as far as the Marine Corps, I knew that in my time in the Marine Corps, I remember asking God, what am I going to do with these skills that I've developed here in the military once I get out? And it turns out so much of the ethos and culture of the Marine Corps, I think, parallels very well to the Christian life of discipleship and investing in the people around you. You're always pouring into the next generation and the Marines that work for you, and preparing the next leader to take your role. And there's so many parallels to a life of discipleship and what we do in the Marine Corps that it all made sense in hindsight. So I'm putting everything I learned in the Marine Corps to work, and I'm putting everything I learned from the C.S. Lewis Institute to work, and it's great.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit more about the home environment you grew up in. So you said you grew up a good Christian boy.
Yeah.
Kind of what was your home environment like?
Yeah, it was strange. It wouldn't be what you'd expect when someone tells you that they grew up a good Christian kid. I grew up in the city of Chicago, North Side. I grew up at Moody Church, where you and I are both familiar. And I had a mother and a grandmother who faithfully made sure I went to church every Sunday. My father made sure I went to church every Sunday too, because he thought it was good for me, but he didn't go. Although I think he would have said he was a Christian, but he was also a practicing Buddhist. So I grew up going to a Lutheran grammar school for 8 years, but they were evangelical Lutheran. I went to a Catholic high school for 4 years. I went to Moody Church, was non-denominational, sort of Baptistic, a little bit more fundamentalistic back in those days than they are now. And a dad who was practicing Buddhist, so I kind of had this eclectic mix of things. But by and large, I would have considered myself a Christian. And I was very, very immersed in the life of the church and the youth group in my high school years. And I lived at their summer camp. The Moody Church used to have a summer camp. And so I either was in youth group, or I was at summer camp, or even in my high school years, I worked at the church as one of the custodians. So it was a big, big part of my life.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
With growing up with that in that environment, it's in hindsight, how did the approach of your father affect your view of God, Christianity, your faith?
Yeah, my father, highly uneducated but smart.
Okay.
I think he didn't make it much past the 7th or 8th grade, or so he didn't finish high school. He ended up getting a GED, and he got
Okay.
in the Marine Corps. I think he lied to get in the Marine Corps. I think he was underage when he was 17,
Okay.
because he had a very rough home life. So that was his ticket out. And we are all products of our parents, but I think quite often, especially if there are 2 or 3 kids in the family, you tend to gravitate to be like one or the other. I think my brother was more like my mother, and I was more like my father. So I see, especially after he passed, I started to see more of it. My dad was very philosophically minded. He was always interested in the big questions in life. His journey led him into Buddhism because he spent a lot of his formative years in Asia, when he joined the Marine Corps. He was in Vietnam for 2.5 years, lived in Okinawa, Japan, because he was stationed there. So he got really immersed in that culture. And most of his friends that he hung out with as I was growing up were Asian, usually Thai or Vietnamese or something like that. So that's a culture he got immersed in. But he would ask those questions, and it really wasn't until after my dad died unexpectedly that I kind of put this together and go, well, that's kind of what I'm doing, but I'm finding the answers in Christianity. So he asked the questions, he came to different conclusions, and I never really got a chance to push back on some of those as deeply as I would have liked with him. But we're similar in that respects, asking questions and philosophically minded, I guess.
Okay. And you mentioned that he was in the Marine Corps as well. Did that influence your choice to go into the Marines?
Absolutely not.
No. Okay.
No, I guess it did. But the funny thing is I had friends telling me, you're the last guy I thought that would go in the Marine Corps. Because I'm Gen X. I was a typical slacker. I was not a great student, but I did make it through college. And I just had no desire for that kind of commitment. I was very commitment averse, but I did want to fly. I wanted to be an astronaut. That's what I wanted to be. But we didn't have Google in those days, so I didn't know having an engineering degree would actually give me a leg up. So I got an English degree instead. But I say it did have some effect because I wanted to get an air contract to go to into one of the services, and I was willing to go either Navy or Marine Corps. Had no desire. My dad biased me against the Air Force. Nothing against my Air Force brothers and sisters, but at the time he tainted me against them, and I ended up going in the Marine Corps because they offered me an air contract. So you have to be an officer to have an officer. You got a college degree, and so that's actually what kept me in college because I hated school. My freshman year in college, I was ready to drop out. I wanted to go to racing school and race cars. But I got offered this air contract, so I made the decision to stay. And I went Marine Corps because my dad had instilled in me the pride that, the few, the proud kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But I didn't choose to go in the Marine Corps because I felt like I needed to follow his footsteps.
Okay. Gotcha.
So it kind of happened by accident, but there was some bias in me because of that.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other family members in the armed services, armed forces?
Yeah, we come from a family, turns out, my father retired from the Marine Corps when I was little, so I didn't grow up a military brat. I just grew up with this. Okay. He was Marine through and through, so it kind of bled out of him. But I had a cousin that went in the Marine Corps and was another career Marine. So my dad did 20, my cousin did 20. We have another cousin whose husband was a career Navy. My brother ended up going in the Coast Guard. He enlisted in the Coast Guard when he was in his mid-20s and did a career there. So, yes, I wouldn't say, though, it was like an entrenched military family like some I know where it's just tradition that we pass on. And, like your dad's a pastor, the same thing in some pastor families. Someone's got to carry the pastoral torch. It wasn't like that. It just kind of worked out.
Okay.
So I thought I was going to be a journalist originally. So that's why I went into English at that point because I love writing. I thought I would be a journalist of some sort. Okay. When the air contract came out, I dumped all that.
Gotcha. Okay, so got the air contract, joined the Marines. What did you want to fly?
Well, everybody wants to be Maverick. I mean, I was 15 or 16 when Top Gun came out, and so everybody wants to be Maverick, but not everybody gets to be Maverick. It comes down to the needs of the service, and then what slots they have open. I shouldn't say that. There's a small percentage that wanted to fly cargo airplane because they wanted a free ticket into the airlines, because that's where the big money's at. But I ended up flying helicopters, and I loved it. They tell you before you fly anything, don't worry about what you end up flying. You're going to love. Everybody loves what they end up flying, and it was true. I absolutely loved what I flew. When I first selected it, I was like, oh, I want to hate this, but I loved it. I loved every minute of it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you still go up at all?
No, I retired in 2012. I think my last flight was, but it wasn't 2000, summer of 2012. I flew with a buddy of mine in his squadron. And no, I mean, I left the Marine Corps and jumped right into seminary, and I did 4 years working on a double master's, and I just was buried. And I'm not current on any of my qualifications. I'd have to get a new medical, and flying is money. So, I enjoy it, but you know what I miss more than anything else? I miss the people. There's a certain camaraderie and there's a certain culture in the squadrons and I miss the people more than anything else, and flying with them. And civilian flying just isn't as fun as military flying.
Gotcha. Okay, I was going to ask about civilian.
In my opinion, it's sort of like if you were driving NASCAR or Formula One, or pick your favorite racer, and then they go, "Hey, how'd you like to drive a CTA bus?" Like, I'd like to get back into maybe some aerobatic flying and stuff like that, but that would take a lot of time and effort. So
gotcha.
I miss it a little bit now and then, but it's okay.
Okay.
If any of your listeners have an airplane and want to take me up, I'm happy to.
So. All right. So you all heard it. If somebody does listen to this and they have that connection, definitely reach out and let us know.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned that you, right after you retired, you went into seminary and studied. Like, why the shift into seminary after retirement?
Well, so when I realized that I'd never been discipled, I went on about a 2.5 year journey looking for someone to disciple me, because I started hearing from friends of mine who are believers in the Marine Corps about experiences they had with people that were in ministries like navigators or crew or something like that. And I'd never had that. And that's when it dawned on me, even while I was growing up, I had some strong Christian men around me, and I was in some good Christian community, but nobody ever had directly poured into me. So on the one hand, that shows the importance of good Christian community, that how of community of any kind affects you, whether it's good, bad. And in this case, it was Christian community. So I was able to maintain a faithful living style. And I know I wasn't coerced. I loved it. I was happy to do it. I participated in it fully. But then when I was outside of that community, I was not equipped to continue to stay on that. And I was very easily swayed into some things that, just the party lifestyle in college. I don't need to recount it all, but it's a typical story. So when I did this discipleship program with the Institute, and it changed my life, it just captured my heart, and I was getting redirected. I knew I wanted to keep growing the way I had then, and I needed to do something more. And I felt like I had to make up for lost time. So I felt like seminary would help me catch up to where I should have been. I started seminary when I was 42. So I thought, okay, I've wasted the last 15 years of my life. This ought to catch me up pretty quickly. And I went to seminary where most of the people were half my age, but twice as sharp. And I wondered what I got myself into. So the goal originally was just for me to grow. And I did. It was great. And I knew that I wanted to go into ministry somehow, but I didn't feel called to be a pastor. I'd been a confidant and a partner to pastors over the last 6-8 years of my time in the Marine Corps, and saw the struggles they had, and I just felt like I could be more effective from outside the pastorate, because there are men called into that job, but they need people outside the pastorate who are also co-laborers, because if everybody goes to be a pastor, what's left? So I never say never, but right now I still don't feel called to be a pastor. But I knew I was going to go into ministry. And at the time I thought I was going to become like an apologist or something like that. And that's when the Institute approached me. And I thought, oh, that's perfect. This is my heart, is to disciple, pour into people, encourage them, mentor, things like that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So, so you went through the program in 2008, and you alluded a little bit to what was going on in your life that made the program attractive. How did you learn about the program? So you heard about Krug and some other things like that from other Marines. You were looking for discipleship, but
Yeah.
like, did you come across C.S. Lewis?
Well, I was hanging out with a bunch of Marines in Northern Virginia. I was based in Quantico,
Okay.
Virginia, big Marine Corps base. Most people know it for the FBI Academy, but it's a Marine Corps base where the FBI Academy is held. And an old retired Vietnam vet used to come and hang out with us, and he was involved with them, and he had mentioned something, and I got exposed to it through him, and I heard about an event they were doing through him, and I went to it, and he just said, hey, go meet these guys. And I did, and I got to know the president of the Institute, a guy who I still consider my mentor, sort of spiritual father to this day. He was the guy that mentored me when I was in the program. And yeah, I just hung out with him for about a year or so, and then, this guy Tom encouraged me to participate in the fellows program, and I'd heard about it by then through their events and their literature and whatnot. I said, I was just waiting for you to tell me how to do it, and I did it, and it just changed my life. It's what I needed, but I didn't know I was looking for it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I like to liken it. Ties into the fitness motif you have. I call it spiritual CrossFit.
Mm.
It's like
Okay.
spiritual CrossFit, people get up at crazy hours in the morning to go out there and destroy their bodies for the good of their health. This is something similar, although you don't have to get up at 6 a.m. to do it. But it is that kind of serious, intentional, and sometimes intense approach to how am I going to grow, where I'm going to make some sacrifices to grow rather than a casual Christianity and an easy recipe, which is kind of what we tend to do with our Christian life. We just try to sprinkle something on top of what we're doing, think it's going to season everything and make it better. And it's like, no, we need to cut some things out and make some changes.
Okay. Can you describe a bit more it's like, we as Christians, we know when we say pour into, and different things like that, what we're talking about, but what did the discipleship for you entail? What did it look like?
When I went through the program, you mean?
Yeah. What did that
Well,
look like with another like spiritual father, using the term pouring into you, but in different
yeah.
language? Practically, what did that look like?
Well, I'm tempted not to go into a deep dive and turn this into a science project, but when it comes to discipleship, at least Christian discipleship, we tend to reduce it to one-on-one mentoring. And even now, I've just kind of spoken in those terms because it's easier to highlight my experience with Tom. But really, it was more than that. It involved small group settings, and it involved lectures where somebody came in and taught us. It involved even smaller groups of 3 or 4 people, discipleship groups, where you get into peer-to-peer discipleship. And so while my time with Tom was formative, even transformative, what really impacted me the most was my time learning about and understanding peer-to-peer discipleship, where I was in a group with 2 other men. And I found myself in a group where one was a young guy wrestling with whether or not to get married, and one was a guy just slightly older than me who was clinging. His marriage was on life support at the time. It might be a little overstatement, but they were struggling. And I found myself in the middle where me and this older guy were coaching this young guy and on the steps you take to getting into marriage. And then the younger guy wasn't really help when it came to help wrestling with marriage. But I was able to kind of walk alongside this friend of mine, and their marriage is happy today. They've come a long way. So I grew a lot because I had to do. And as you know, there's lots of ways of learning. And some ways of learning, you don't really get it until you actually have to do it.
Yeah.
So I had a model with this guy, Tom, and I learned a lot and I received, but I actually had to put it into practice with these guys. And that's really what affected my learning a lot more. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's back up a little bit. Tell us a bit more about C.S. Lewis. Like, who is he? What did he do? Why is there a foundation named after him?
Yes. C.S. Lewis, he was considered probably the greatest Christian apologist of the 20th century.
An apologist is?
An apologist is someone who argues for, makes a case for a particular thing, in this case, a Christian apologist. So he's arguing for and commending, making a case for Christianity. But he didn't do that full time like you might see nowadays when you go on YouTube and you see debates between atheists and Christians and whatnot. What he was he was a literature professor at Oxford and then later Cambridge. He's famous for his fiction work. He wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian. There's 7 books in the series, and I think Netflix is about to come out with a new series on it. But Disney had made some of the films. People may be familiar with him. He's also written the Space Trilogy, better known as the Ransom Trilogy. But he also wrote a lot of nonfiction. He wrote Mere Christianity, which is an incredibly famous book. He's written the Screwtape Letters, which has been turned into a stage play. If you're in Chicago, it's out here in September. But he's a guy who departed the faith after his mother died because he didn't think God didn't answer his prayers when his mother died when he was a boy. So he was an atheist, and he came to faith later in life thanks to a couple of guys, one of whom was J.R.R. Tolkien, author of Lord of the Rings. And they were colleagues at Oxford University. And they are just a group of incredibly talented men who hung out together. So our institute bears his name. There's a lot of organizations that bear the name of Lewis. I like to say most of them are there to celebrate and preserve his legacy. And I like to say we're really the one that's most focused on living out his legacy because our motto is discipleship of heart and mind. And I mean, first off, Lewis would be rolling over in the grave if he knew there were so many organizations bearing his name. Yeah. But one of our co-founders, we were started in 1976. One of our co-founders, who he's still alive, he's going to be 103 in November of this year.
All right.
And he's sharp. He's still sharp. He knew Lewis personally, and the vision he said was the goal of the institute is not to make more fans of Lewis, but to make more people like Lewis. People who aren't just intellectual or aren't all emotions, but people who are connected through head and heart. And that's what makes his writings so that stand the test of time, because they do hit you in the heart, even while they're incredibly intellectually captivating as well. And so I like to say Walter Hooper, who was Lewis's secretary, in a foreword for a book once said, Lewis was the most thoroughly converted man I know that I've ever met. And that's what we're trying to do, is help people be more thoroughly converted in their lives, is to live out their life in both personal and public life. So some people are really great publicly because they can say and do the right things, but behind the scenes, they're a mess. And then some people the other way around, they've got their act together, but they're kind of timid, and their public life doesn't look any different than the average person. So we're trying to synchronize the head and the heart and the public and the private lives.
Gotcha. Okay. Awesome. You mentioned, so you had 2 masters right after you retired from the Marine Corps. And in the Marine Corps, I was reading too, you also got a master's there. So someone who, Gen X, self-described slacker, et cetera, now with 3 masters, like, how did you had the flight, you had the flight school. I mean, the opportunity.
Flight school beat all that out of me. Flight school was sink or swim from the get-go. Actually, the Marine Corps alone is there. I mean, officers candidate school, they don't have a quota. They tell you all along, if we graduate a class of 1 or none, we're fine with that. They're always trying to weed you out. They don't want someone going into the Marine Corps as an officer who's half-hearted. And so, I would say I learned some grit and resolve and determination, but it also pulled it out of me as well. It was there. You just needed someone to help. But also I learned through example and partnership with others how to do that. So officers candidate school is like the boot camp for officers. Incredibly physical, wears you out mentally and physically to the point of break. And then, of course, flight school was very much sink or swim. I mean, guys wash out of that all the time. And so that was, you had to get your game face on. So studying and things like that. So life in the Marine Corps detoxed me from my slackerness. You can only survive in the Marine Corps so long as a bit of a slacker, I guess. There's probably some that get in the door, but they don't last that long. You have to be able to perform. So yeah, it worked that out of me. So I was in Command and Staff College as a major, and you just had to write an extra paper. It's a year-long school, and you do some extra research, write a paper, and you get a master's. So I thought, okay, this is a master's that I think I shouldn't pass up. I wasn't going to do it. A friend of mine just smacked me, said, just write the paper. But I thought that would be the only master's I would ever get. And then I did the fellows program a couple years later. That's when I decided I needed to go do something.
Mm-hmm.
So I feared
Okay.
school all the time just because I was so bad in my undergrad, and I just thought I would
Yeah.
never go back. But those experiences rebuilt my confidence.
Good. Awesome. Okay. Okay.
And
Um,
I'm happy to say I'm a pretty good student now.
nice. Do you, this question just came to mind. Do you think that some of your, I mean, the fact that your dad only went up through like junior high or something like that, and he got his GED, did some of that play into your view of your own capabilities or not at all?
No, not
Okay.
really. I grew up in a different generation, and I mean, I measured myself more against my peers
Okay.
than my father. He had an incredibly rough upbringing, so I have no doubt with the proper training and focus when he's younger, he could have done it as well. It was just
Gotcha.
opportunities. He had an abusive stepfather, so
Mm,
he spent a lot of his life on the streets just to avoid all that. So
gotcha.
no, I didn't. It wasn't that at all.
Okay. Okay. Um, when you were in the service, were you deployed at all?
Oh, lots. I mean, I was in for 20 years, so I mean, I've got at least 5 years of my life on a ship. Um, I did 7 months in Afghanistan, but there's so many before 9/11. There were so many just regular deployments and exercises I was gone for, much
Yeah.
less after. 9/11 was right about the halfway mark of my 20-year career.
Okay.
So, yeah, so I've deployed more than I count.
Gotcha. How did your view of yourself and of the world change? Like after deployments, being exposed to other areas of the world, cultures, ways of thought, warfare.
Well, the first, so when I finally finished all the flight training, I'd been married and we had a daughter who was about 3 months old, and then we jumped on a plane and moved to Okinawa, Japan.
Okay.
That's where my father did influence me. I heard him talk about Okinawa for so many years. I wanted to check this out. So
Okay.
my first duty station was in Okinawa, Japan for about 4.5 years. And, this was the mid 90s, mid to late 90s. And it was incredible. It was really it was my first time outside the United States. And so no internet, no, this is all pre-internet stuff. Um, it was interesting to experience another culture, watch international news, meet other people, and in a sense, it can make you appreciate the United States more. In other ways,
Yeah.
um, I don't want to say diminish your view of the United States, but I remember at one point I had not been in the United States for 2 years, and I came back to do some training, and I was in Yuma, Arizona, so not like New York City, where the tip you think of New Yorkers as rude or something like that, big city
Yeah.
stuff. Um, I went into a McDonald's or some fast food joint and ordered something, and everywhere I went, Americans just struck me as incredibly rude. And like I said, this is small town America. Everybody seemed rude to me. And I realized that in Okinawa, everybody's incredibly polite. You walk into the McDonald's, I mean, this is why the McDonald's comes to mind. I remember the first time going into a McDonald's there, everybody jumps. They're hopping out of their skins to serve you and make sure you have the best experience. And it's just that way in everything. And
Yeah.
so by contrast, we seem very rude. So it just helped me see the United States with different eyes and to appreciate other cultures better too. And then of course I spent lots of time in Thailand, in
Uh-huh.
Australia, in the Philippines and other places, and saw a lot of the differences there. I'm a huge lover of Thailand and the Thai people. I love Okinawa. So I love America a lot that we have here, but I feel like it's not just rose colored glasses anymore. I can see legitimate things where we could be better.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
How did I don't know, how did your view of God change during your time service as well with those experiences? Change your view of America and other cultures, but how did your view of God change?
That's a good question. I don't know that it was my time outside the United States that changed it that much. A lot of it was what was going on in my life as a new father and husband and having a second kid, and then God bringing certain people into my life to kind of nudge me along in my own growth. I remember one particular brother who I'm still good friends with, really helped spur me on to, as we say, love and good works. But I guess I would say if it helped me in anything, we can have a very Western-oriented view of Christianity. And I don't think I take that for granted anymore, because I have seen Japanese Christians, faithful Japanese Christians, but they are expressions of faith, while the same are not the same.
Yeah.
And I've heard similar stories of people who spend lots of time in other countries. So I don't get too hung up on Western expressions of faith, like it's got to be done a certain way, So I guess that would be the one thing. But, I would think Lewis probably has had a bigger impact on my view of who God is. He calls God the great iconoclast. He keeps blowing up. Once we think we haven't figured out, he blows that up. So it keeps expanding. So I guess those are just examples of the iconoclasm and me getting blown up as I experienced him in other places and whatnot.
Okay. That leads into another question I was going to ask. How can you elaborate a bit more on how your view of Christians changed with this? So you mentioned some of the different expressions of faith, and like Okinawa, Japan, like what would be an example of it different there and here?
Yeah. Oh, what a loaded question. And I can go make a lot of people mad on this one. Since I'm not so beholden necessarily to Westernized expressions of Christianity, I'm not saying they're wrong either. I'm just saying, I think sometimes we think that's the way. I think, if anything, I'm a little distraught sometimes about how we have conflated our views of the United States and our faith. And the two get conflated in such a way that we confuse our citizenship. The Apostle Paul talks about our citizenship being in heaven. And of course we have earthly citizenship, but I think sometimes we've confused the two. And so if I were to criticize something about the United States that you hold near and dear to your heart, you could easily confuse it as a criticism of your faith and as Christianity. And I think the way you defend the United States would be very different than the way you would defend your faith. Theoretically, you could change your American citizenship. If something were to happen, and I know you're happily married, but let's just say you were a single guy, and then you met, a beautiful Japanese lady, and you were fluent in Japanese, you could get married and then just move to Japan because she wants to be near family, and you could take on Japanese citizenship. And now technically, citizenship-wise, you're Japanese, but you'd still be a Christian. And so that's the thing that needs to transcend things. And I think we've seen this played out in our politics, and even now with the Israel-Iran conflict. I'm not saying we don't side with Israel or anything like that. I'm not saying anything, quite frankly. I'm just saying the way we interpret things sometimes can be overly loaded. And it just concerns me, the way patriotism and faith have gotten a little tied up together. They're related. Christians should be active politically, and everything we should. I mean, I'm patriotic. I'm very patriotic. So, I defy anyone to tell me that I don't love my country after 20 years and being in multiple combat zones. But that's, I would say, one thing that has concerned me, that I feel like being outside the United States has helped me see a little bit more clearly.
Okay.
Other non-American forms of Christianity that are faithful and orthodox are just as faithful forms of Christianity than our American version.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. Good. How long have you been married?
You know the answer to this. 30 years as of a couple days ago.
Yep. Congratulations. And
yeah, we dated for 7 years prior to that. So.
Okay, so you all have been together for a while.
Yeah, we started dating when she was 18, I was 17. We were separated only by a few months, but and so we dated through college, and then the first 3 years of Marine Corps. So people were like, 7 years, what took you so long? Well, I wasn't going to get married at 20. So I was 24, just shy of my 25th birthday, and she was 25 when we got married. So I think that's young enough. But we've been together, nearly 40 years in some capacity or another.
Wow. Okay. Awesome. And I guess through all of this, how would you describe her influence on your journey through all of this?
Oh, great influence. She's a servant. My wife is a servant, so much so that sometimes I'm ashamed to admit that I'll be annoyed, like, oh, just let them be. So you're familiar with this, but your listeners may not be. We're both familiar with Moody Church. If we were to go to church on Sunday and park in Piper's Alley, which is a parking lot near Moody Church, you'd walk a short little block to the church, and in that short little block, there's lots of street people and panhandlers, and of course, I'll want to get to church on time, and I'll truck along, and then I'll stop and turn around and find out that my wife is praying with one of them. Sure, maybe $5, but is praying with somebody. So, and then she just serves. We go to someone's house, I know where to find her. She's in the kitchen helping do dishes or prepare or whatever. So those sorts of things have challenged my grumpiness, where, I've just got my thing to do. So it makes me understand, everybody knows the story of the Good Samaritan.
Yeah.
The guys on the road that left the guy, I completely understand that mindset because I've got a task. I'm task oriented. I can't stop. Somebody will take care of him.
Gotcha.
So I'm not proud of it, but I understand. I understand.
I understand.
So that's a kind of effect. Yes.
Awesome. Okay. And then I guess through this, because one of the things I think that would be interesting as well is there are, marriages in the U.S. and I guess in a number of other countries as well are really struggling, on decline, or divorce rates are up, broken families, etc. You didn't come from the greatest situation, but you and your wife have been married 30 years, together longer, 2 children. How would, in the midst of quite the adventure of, military service and master's degrees and, not-for-profit work, etc., what advice would you give to younger couples, I guess akin to the young man that you were in the Fellows program with, as they prepare to do life with someone or in the early stages of doing life with someone, with a spouse?
Well, yeah, this is interesting because as I was in seminary in my early 40s, I'm in my mid 50s now, I saw a lot of angst about marriage, angst that didn't exist for me at that age.
Okay.
I didn't understand it. It took me a while to understand it. Also, another sort of a parallel one was angst about what it means to be a man. Another one I didn't have any angst about. I think I've come to understand both of those better as to why there's angst with the generation, facing these things. I guess for the young men who are single and looking to do life, marriage isn't a given. I know the church, especially the Christian church, has idealized that in a way that that's the only way to live a fulfilled life. But Jesus wasn't married. I don't think he was unfulfilled. And, there's things like there's plenty of unmarried men in the Bible who went on to be used by God. So one, don't assume that's a given that your life is not fulfilled if you're not. And even if you are to be married, Mark, the pastor from Washington, D.C., Mark Dever, made a challenge, and I thought this was really good. If you're waiting to get married, this is good advice from men and women. If you're waiting to get married to be used by God, you're just wasting. What are you doing with your singleness? There's so much you can do in your singleness that you can't do when you're married. Make good use of your singleness. Live for God now. And, the Lord will bring your partner to you. And if you get married, there's no guarantee you'll do it in your 20s and 30s. You could be someone, I know people who've gotten married for the first time later in life when they're in their 50s. So be a good steward of what you have here and now. If you are on a trajectory, you're dating someone, you got your eye on someone, make Christ the first love of your life. That has to be you want a partner that loves Christ more than you. So that you both grow closer to him, you'll grow closer to each other. He's got to be the center of it. And then if you do, this is something I learned early on because I came from a family of men, And then I had 2 girls. And so I went from being the majority to the minority. I read a book by Robert Wolgemuth called She Calls Me Daddy, because I thought I needed to do a little homework. And one of the things that really struck me in that book was, you want to be a good father, love your wife. And the marriage is the primary relationship in that institution of a family. And the more you love your wife, and vice versa, the more your kids see this, and it creates a more stable environment. And all too often, young parents prioritize their kids, even subconsciously, and the relationship falls into disrepair, even if, again, unintentionally, unconsciously, and then that creates strife. And then you stay together for the kids, or you do things for the kids. No, sacrifice that time and be together, because a happy, stable marriage affects everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, yeah. That's great. Yeah. Before we wrap up, you tell us more about your work with CSLI now. Like, what are your main goal of it? Ways that the Lord has been moving and working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like you, I'm trying to be a faithful steward of my gifts and talents, and it's been a blessing to work with you over the years, and I look forward to doing it more. The Institute, like I said, exists to make more people like Lewis. So I look at it as my job here in the Chicagoland area to fan the flames of discipleship. And we do that, I think, in a 2-pronged approach. One is on the individual level. You'll have individual people that are in churches and are feeling unfulfilled or feel the need for more for one reason or another. And they may have hit some sort of ceiling in their church or whatever. Some churches don't fully understand discipleship. Some are just under-resourced and undermanned. There's a lot of reasons. I'm not trying to throw a dart at the church. So we can, and we can also be a boon to the church by building up their people as well. So they can come in and, as I like to say, help the pastors row the boat. But that's an individual drip, drip, drip kind of thing. It's transformative and it's good for the individuals, and we charge them to go back in the church. But the other part of it is I want to work directly with churches to help them understand. I wasn't satisfied with a master's. I'm working on a doctor of ministry degree right now, and I'm working on something I've played around with, a workshop on discipleship, just to kind of help set the stage for church staffs to wrestle with how to the beginnings of creating a strategy, and I'd never tell churches what to do because they know their people, but I can offer solutions and ways to think about it. Mm-hmm. And I've done this for a few churches in the Chicagoland area, and it's been somewhat successful. So that's what I'm doing in my academic endeavor, and that's what I'm trying to live out in my day-to-day ministry, because rather than help individuals, which I'll do all day, it's gratifying. I want to help churches do it better, because then it'll be more amplifying, more multiplied, and help the church make disciples, because that's what we're called to do. We're supposed to love God and love people, and that is the sum of discipleship and seeing people formed in Christ. So that's what I want to do. I want to help people do that. And we run fun events where we teach on different topics, sexuality or prayer, whatever. But ultimately, we're just trying to help people become more like Christ. And simple, but not easy.
Okay. Yeah, and for clarification, folks, too, when he says make more people like Lewis, he's not elevating Lewis to some, unnatural position.
That's exactly. That you bring up a good point. I've heard a few people say, I don't want to be more like Lewis. I want to be more like Jesus. And I go, well, exactly. Yeah. The Apostle Paul said, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And so I like to say, we've just updated the imagery a little bit, because Paul was a first century Jew. I don't live in the first century. I don't know what a first century Jew would think and act like as much all the time. I can see what Paul would do. Lewis, I relate to a little bit more because he's a bit more modern. That's all. We just said he's just a picture of what it might look like a little bit, as somebody who's completely sold out for Jesus. So imitate Lewis as he imitates Christ.
Exactly.
That's exactly it.
Which means that it's on us to make sure that we're studying and familiarizing ourselves with Christ, so that we can see we're like a Lewis or a Paul, or somebody else that's mentoring us may not be in line with Christ, and we're not in line with Christ as well.
Yeah. So, and we don't even use all of Lewis's works. We are biblically based, so we start with the Bible. Yeah. We only use Lewis sometimes. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So don't worry for you're not going in and like, all right, we're gonna look at Chronicles of Narnia today, you know.
No, we had actually had someone apply for the program once, and when I informed him that this was not a Lewis study course, that we actually read the Bible and a lot of other people, he goes, "Oh, I just
Yeah.
wanted to read Lewis. That's not for me." I said, "Okay, sorry."
Oh, all right. Cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time. In the show notes, when this goes live, people will be able to get in touch with you.
Sure.
So, yeah, that's definitely one of the goals. They can reach out to you, learn more about C.S. Lewis Institute Chicago, you, your work, etc., the Fellows program. So,
Yeah, I love it. If you like Brian and his work, I think you'll like us because he's got his fingerprints on a lot of our stuff. So, and he will again in the future. So,
yeah, for those who don't know, KJ and I have also worked on various like projects, visual identity projects for different events that they've had and stuff like that, fundraisers over the years. So,
oh yeah, did the big one, our
cool.
last one. Aslan is on the move, and it looked great.
Yeah, so awesome. Well, thanks again, KJ. God bless, and I look forward to our next chat.
Appreciate it, brother. Take care.